Well, good morning, or something. Looking at some of you here drinking champagne at 10 a.m. I guess it's been I guess you can go to sleep soon. Just have to get through this, right? I said a couple of years ago here, starting a rock and roll festival at 10 a.m. is like asking for milk at CBGB's at 3 a.m. This is quite a crowd. They get bigger and bigger every year. And I'm very happy to once again be able to open this, because I think this is one of the coolest things for not only Estonia, but rather in the region, that we have something as wonderful as Tallinn Music Week, where you really do get to see what's new, interesting, what's happening in music and more broadly in contemporary culture. For example, the classical music rave tonight must be, I think, the first ever anywhere. And I look forward to that if I can stay up that long, because I'm old, you know. Oddly enough, I woke up this morning, I went to my computer, and I had a mail from someone who I last saw 35 years ago. 35 years ago, I was teaching in a private school. I taught English and I taught science, but then there were these kids who really weren't really interested in anything. You might as well call them stoners or something. But anyway, in order to get them enthused, on Friday afternoons I taught a course called The History of Rock and Roll, which is pretty funny given that in 1979 rock and roll was, well, basically, you know, what was it, 25 years old, and that was 35 years ago. But anyway, he wrote me a letter this morning. I hadn't heard from him 35 years, and he said how the course had changed his life. He didn't say for the better or for the worse, but in any case. So 7 years of Tallinn Music Week is a short history compared to the history of rock and roll. I said, I love, for some reason here, I'm always quoting Ezra Pound, who did say poets are the antennae of the race, and I think that is translated now over to the culture of music, which in so many ways has been that part of contemporary culture that senses things earlier. I got into trouble here 3 years ago when I talked about Pussy Riot, which no one had heard about at the time. I was soon excommunicated from the Lutheran Church, but in any case, in general, music tends to be ahead of everything. I'm glad this year there's one area where music has been behind things, and it's catching up with the boring, dull world of politics, which is that a country like ours, which became re-established its independence in 1991, made its way back to Europe officially in 2004. We thought we'd eradicated all of the differences between Eastern and Western Europe with joining the European Union and so on. But nonetheless, there's this thing which continues to be called the Central East European Talent Exchange Program, as opposed to the European Talent Exchange Program, as if there's something kind of special or second rate or second class about us Central and East Europeans, because, you know. But fortunately, that is now coming to an end, and I think that's one of the events that we have here that is worth appreciating, that finally we too, we are recognized as being real people when it comes to music, even though I do think that we might have to reinstitute this soon, because actually much of the interesting stuff is coming from this part of the world. A little bit about how this is all arranged. I would say that this is largely a private sector effort that Helen has been pursuing here, which on the one hand makes it much more difficult to do, because trying to do things without here, especially in our dear European Union, where everything requires funding from the EU or the state, to do something in spite of that is quite an accomplishment. But then again, I think for music it is worthwhile doing. It's understandable because because music, rock and roll, punk, they've all been largely anti-establishment, and so there's always this kind of strange sort of have this queasy feeling when I see officially promoted rock and roll, because it doesn't seem like it's quite the right thing. If you think about the history again, even with Elvis pumping his thighs in 1953, 54, and that was all anti-establishment, and everything since then has at least, if not been really anti-establishment, at least it's had that tinge to it. It was already in the 70s that Malcolm McLaren figured out that if you really want to make money, you're going to create a neo-Marxist revolutionary band, which he did, and it's called The Clash. It's pretty funny to think about a Marxist punk band being created by a capitalist because you can make more money by being revolutionary and anti-establishment. So that was learned already 35 years ago. But on the other hand, what is really good, and here comes the political moment of my speech, which is that I like it that way. When rock and roll has to do it, it's on its own, because when it goes the other way, it can do nasty things. I would recommend everyone here, and you can write it down, but to go to YouTube and type in biker show or bike show Sevastopol 2014, and you'll find an hour-long link there. And then you'll see what happens when rock and roll and hip hop and everything else is in the service of the state. It is a genuine Gesamtkunstwerk, if that means anything to anyone, but that was Richard Wagner's idea of the total piece of art, including everything. And this is a synthesis of all forms of art, in this case rock and roll, hip hop, light shows, ballet dancers in the shape of swastikas, fireworks, real fire, a huge motorcycle gang on Harleys with flags, genuine spectacle with tanks on stage, and full of war and hate. It makes Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda masterpiece, Triumph of the Will, or Triumph des Willes, really pale in comparison. And so the Gesamtwerk today is even more Gesamt than anything Richard Wagner could conceive of, because we have all these new media, and for some reason Gesamtwerke tend to support totalitarian ends. They did in the case of Leni Riefenstahl. They did in the case actually in Bayreuth as well, but today we see it being used in the service of the state in ways that I could never have conceived of in the past. So if we think that rock and roll is just fun and anti-establishment, we have to realize that rock and roll can be used to also very nasty authoritarian ends, especially when it is fueled by oil and other things. So keep in mind, rock and roll is great, music is fantastic, but let's keep it at the grassroots. Let's keep it as something that we do on our own. Let's not bring it to the service of authoritarianism, hatred, and warmongering. I'm glad this festival is taking place here precisely in the way it is taking place, in the spirit of that Helen has devoted here. This is the 7th time. Here you can see what happens when you have the spontaneous live culture that you can muster in a free society without the dull, heavy hand of the state, or even without the dull, heavy hand of the president. Let us keep in mind, music should be redemptive, not in the service of the state. But I don't want to talk anymore because you'll fall asleep, because I am a politician. So I'm going to end it with that. And really, this is one of my favorite times of the year. I get to come here, see Helen, listen to music. It's fantastic. Welcome to Estonia.